Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, is Ukraine possibly splitting? Crimean lawmakers vote to join Russia and set a referendum for March 16th. Obama orders sanctions in response to Russia's intervention. Following Seoul's condemnation of Japan for denying its past wrongdoings at a UN session, Tokyo takes a step back, saying it will carry on the so-called Kono Statement of 1993, which apologizes to the victims of wartime sexual slavery. Plus, in the latest in the long-running legal battle between the world's biggest smartphone rivals, a California court has ruled against Apple's request to ban sales of smartphones, Samsung smartphones, in the United States. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ojin-ju in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. On a day of fast-moving developments in Ukraine, Western nations are condemning Crimea's move to vote on reuniting the autonomous region with Russia.
U.S. President Barack Obama spoke directly with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and urged a diplomatic resolution to the conflict. Arirang News' Kwon Soa has our top story.
Crimea was, is, and will be an integral part of Ukraine.
That was the statement by Ukraine's interim prime minister on Thursday in response to the Crimean Parliament's vote to bring forward a referendum on March 16th to reunite the autonomous republic with Russia. The US and EU stood with the Ukrainian government in condemning the move, saying the referendum violates the Ukrainian constitution as well as international law. The EU at a meeting in Brussels urged Russia to de-escalate the situation.
Any further steps by the Russian Federation to destabilize the situation in Ukraine would lead to severe and far-reaching consequences for relations between the European Union and its member states on the one hand and the Russian Federation on the other hand, which will include a broad range of economic areas.
The EU talked of sanctions, including travel bans and asset freezes. A cancellation of an upcoming EU-Russia summit was also considered. However, not all EU members are in favor of the proposed sanctions, since they would come at a cost to them as well. The US has already imposed visa restrictions on Russian officials. President Barack Obama told his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that Russia's violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity had prompted the US to take a number of punitive steps in response. The White House says that during an hour-long phone call Thursday, hours after the Crimean vote, Obama called on Putin to hold direct talks with the new government in Ukraine and urged him to find a diplomatic resolution to the situation. Officials and experts believe that the Ukrainian crisis is no longer one between divided groups within the country, but also a serious issue between the West and Russia. UK Prime Minister David Cameron compared the situation to World War II, saying the slightest miscalculation could see the situation spiral out of control. Kwon Soa, Arirang News.
Korea's efforts to pressure Japan to take responsibility for its past wrongdoings may be paying dividends. Japan has denied that it has plans to make changes to its official apology to the Korean victims of wartime sexual slavery. It is, however, sticking to its stance that the victims were compensated under a bilateral treaty signed in 1965. Connie Kim reports.
Korea's fight for Japan to take responsibility and compensate the victims of its wartime sexual slavery rolled on in Geneva on Thursday. Korea's foreign minister had the floor and laid out a compelling and emotional case for the victims at the UN Human Rights Council meeting on Wednesday. But on Thursday, it was Tokyo's turn to put its points across. Japan's ambassador to the UN, Takashi Okada, said Tokyo, contrary to the reports, has never spoken of reviewing the 1993 Kono Statement, in which then Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono apologized to the victims of Japan's sex slavery.
Since then, the position of the government of Japan has not changed at all. The government of Japan has never spoken of reviewing the Kono statement.
Japan's current Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga, speaking in Tokyo Thursday, said that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe does not make light of the fact that Japanese actions caused immeasurable pain to the Korean woman, as recognized by previous governments. Late last month, there were reports Suga had said Tokyo would re-examine the testimony given by former sex slaves, as the government at the time did not verify the victims' remarks. Back in Geneva, Okada said the Japanese government had fully compensated the victims through a 1965 treaty that normalized Korea's economic and diplomatic relations after its liberation from Japan. On Wednesday, Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se had urged Japan to take responsibility and compensate the victims. Yoo Yeon-chul, Korea's ambassador to the UN, urged Japan to admit to and take responsibility for its military's past use of sex slaves.
The political leaders and command officials of Japan have recently tried to deny the Kono statement of 1993.
South Korea wasn't alone in criticizing Tokyo for its past actions and current inaction. The North Korean and Chinese ambassadors to the UN said the Japanese government was trying to deny and hide its past wrongdoings. The U.S. ambassador to Japan, Carolyn Kennedy, on Thursday, called on Korea and Japan to improve relations and said the U.S. will do what it can to help. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, here in Seoul, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim has urged Japan to acknowledge a sexual enslavement of women in the early 20th century, calling it a grave human rights violation. Ambassador Kim has also asked Tokyo to refrain from any more of what he called provocative actions. Our Hwang Sang-hee has the details.
U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim says he understands why South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se took the so-called comfort women issue to the United Nations.
The comfort women issue, the sex slaves issue, is a grave human rights violation. We understand the pain that's felt by these surviving women from that awful experience.
Ambassador Kim urged the Japanese government to work towards reducing the pain and suffering of those forced into sexual slavery by its military in the early 20th century. He said the statement issued by the U.S. Embassy in Japan following Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine late last year was a hard-hitting warning. The shrine honors 14 Class A war criminals, so visits by high-ranking Japanese officials anger Japan's neighboring countries.
And I think, as we've made clear, very clear, we would like Japan to address concerns of its neighbors, and that includes refraining from actions that are seen as provocative.
Ambassador Kim called on the two neighbors to work together on mending ties, as trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan is critical for regional security. This view was echoed by Tom Donilon, a former White House National Security Advisor, on Thursday. At a seminar in Washington, Donilon expressed the hope that the leaders of the two countries meet for talks on the sidelines of the upcoming nuclear security summit this month. But as long as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sticks with his nationalistic stance, summit talks with his South Korean counterpart don't seem likely. President Park Geun-hye has refused to sit down with the Japanese leader since taking office, saying the country must first embrace truth and reconciliation. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The United Nations has extended a mandate for sanctions on North Korea, saying the regime remains a serious concern to international security. This in response to a request from South Korea and the United States to take action against North Korea for the missiles it fired off over the past 2 weeks. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The UN Security Council on Thursday extended a mandate for sanctions on North Korea for another 13 months, until April 2015, after South Korea and the United States denounced North Korea for firing off 2 rounds of ballistic missiles in the last 2 weeks, calling it a clear and calculated sanctions violation. Through a report, they argued the UN Sanctions Committee to examine the Scud missile launches and take appropriate action in response to the violations of multiple Security Council resolutions. Pyongyang launched 2 Scud short-range ballistic missiles from its southeastern coast on February 27th, and 2 more Scud missiles from the same coast on March 3rd. North Korea routinely test-fires short-range missiles, and experts say the recent launches are not expected to raise tensions in the region. The UN Security Council slapped tough sanctions on Pyongyang in response to nuclear tests in 2006 and 2009. Additional UN resolutions require the North to abandon all of its ballistic missile programs. Ballistic missiles can be used to launch nuclear weapons, and additional UN resolutions also demand that North Korea stop its nuclear tests and abandon all of its nuclear weapons programs. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense reform for this year includes preemptive contingency plans to suppress North Korea. This strategy includes both military and non-military measures. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
What is eye-catching about this year's defense reform is that it includes plans to allow South Korea to preemptively strike North Korea if Pyongyang is about to attack. Previously, Seoul's response was limited to local provocations. But the preemptive strike capability adds a whole new strategic level in dealing with Pyongyang's provocations. This includes striking North Korea's missile and nuclear facilities in the early stages, using the so-called kill chain system. Under international law, a country that conducts a preemptive strike could be blamed for starting the war. With that in mind, South Korea's defense ministry says the preemptive strike concept used here will be seen as collective self-defense under international standards. Pyongyang is expected to react strongly to the new reform. But the ministry emphasized that it's to reduce damage and prevent Pyongyang from taking additional provocative measures.
Our main focus is to simultaneously prepare for North's asymmetric power, local and all-out war scenarios.
In addition, the military plans to merge 2 of its 3 army headquarters and set up a ground operations command. The new command will have more air support from the newly enhanced Air Force Air Support Operations Center, and the Army Corps commander will have the authority to call in an airstrike.
The Corps commander's commanding system was simplified with computer networking systems, and we are able to fight off our enemy in real time.
The military plans to deploy unmanned aerial vehicles, state-of-the-art multiple rocket launchers, and other high-tech gadgetry to maximize South Korea's defense capability on the border. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Eun Ju.
Now to the patent battle that refuses to go away. It's good news for Samsung this time, as Apple's request for a permanent U.S. ban on Samsung's patent infringing products has been denied. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A U.S. court has rejected Apple's request for a permanent sales ban on Samsung products. In a ruling Thursday, U.S. District Judge Lucy Koh said Apple had not presented enough evidence to show its patented features were a significant enough driver of consumer demand to warrant an injunction. Judge Koh wrote that numerous features, such as battery life, MP3 player functionality, operating system, text messaging options, GPS, and processor speed were not tested by Apple for the purpose of litigation to see whether they are highly important to U.S. consumers. Apple had earlier stated that around 23 models of Samsung's older smartphones and tablets, including the Galaxy S4G and the Galaxy Tab 10.1, infringe upon its patents. This ruling comes ahead of another patent trial set to begin later this month, involving newer Samsung phones, and could negatively affect any further attempts by Apple to block the sales of those models as well. In a statement, Samsung said it was pleased with the ruling. Apple has yet to comment. Samsung and Apple have been locked in legal battles over patents across the globe for nearly 3 years. In a separate case in 2012, Apple was awarded more than $900 million by a U.S. court over Samsung, which earned $7.7 billion last quarter. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Korean Finance Minister Hyun Suk has expressed his optimism about setting up a won-yuan direct transaction market. Speaking to reporters Thursday, Hyun said he saw the direct currency market between Korea and China as beneficial for the economy if its demands are met. Referring to a similar market set up in 1997, which was shut down due to a lack of demand, Hyun pointed to a need to increase the two countries' trade volume as well as the demand for won in the global market. Under the deal, Korean exporters would be allowed to be paid directly in won, reducing the currency conversion costs into dollars. If we really want to bring about a creative economy in the nation, we need to think outside the box, says Deputy Prime Minister Hyun Suk. The remarks come from the nation's first private-public council meeting on building a creative economy Friday. Hyun vowed to ease regulations on the country's 13 major growth engines, including 5th-generation networks and smart cars. The Science and Future Planning Ministry says the bi-monthly meeting will help people search, develop, and realize their creative ideas. The ministry adds a total of 17 innovation centers will be established around the nation by 2015, starting in the city of Daejeon to help locals pitch their ideas and form venture startups.
And while we're speaking of creating an ecosystem for venture startups, the ministry in charge of science and technology announced some ambitious plans aimed at giving these fledgling companies a leg up. Our Na Hyung-young reports.
Only 30% of the nation's startups survive to the age of 5, according to recent Statistics Korea data, which is one of the reasons why the government is trying to turn the tables for young entrepreneurs who are willing to test creative new ideas. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning has fleshed out its ambitious plan to launch what's widely known as an accelerator program. The Korean government's version of the program aims to help startups by providing a packaged service. A small group, fewer than 10, of wannabe entrepreneurs with creative and unique ideas will be selected in each round. They will be given 3 to 6 months of mentoring and training prior to opening up their businesses, and then they will have a chance to make pitches aimed at locking down investment. After the business is launched, these up-and-coming firms will be provided with marketing and retail networking services so they can break into the domestic market. Not only that, a selected few promising companies will get additional support in tapping into the global market. A total of 10 billion won, or roughly $9.4 million, will be injected into this program this year. The ministry plans to form a special consultative body for the accelerator program by mid-March and has also called on conglomerates to launch similar programs to fund and nurture the nation's startups. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
More than 150 government employees around the country have stepped down to run for an elected post at the upcoming June 4th local elections. The Public Administration Ministry says a total of 152 central and local government officials have tendered their resignations from last December until their deadline of Thursday this week. Some notable names include former Minister of Security and Public Administration Yoo Jong-bok, running for Incheon City Mayor, and ex-Vice Minister of the same ministry, Park Chan-woo, who will run for Cheonan City Mayor. A long-time central and local government official has been tapped to head Korea's Ministry of Security and Public Administration. The Presidential Office of Cheongwade says Kang Byung-gyu, the former Vice Minister of Public Administration and Security during the Lee Myung-bak administration, was nominated to succeed former Minister Yoo Jong-bok. Yoo resigned, as I just mentioned, earlier this week to run for the Incheon City mayoral post in the June local elections. The presidential office says Kang's knowledge and experience from decades-long public service was highly noted for his nomination. Kang's appointment will be made official after a parliamentary hearing. Now, despite their marketed function, electronic cigarettes may be a gateway for adolescents to become real smokers. This, according to a study published in the JAMA Pediatrics on Thursday. It said adolescents who used e-cigarettes were more likely to smoke real cigarettes and less likely to quit than those who did not use the devices. The study was based on data from some 40,000 adolescents who took the National Youth Tobacco Surveys in 2011 and 2012, conducted by the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The study concluded the use of e-cigarettes does not discourage and may encourage conventional cigarette use among US teenagers. Currently, 28 US states have adopted legislation or regulations into law that restrict youth access to e-cigarettes, which are battery-powered devices that deliver nicotine through inhalable vapor.
Good day, I'm Eunice Kim, and here are your headlines from around the world. 5 Afghan soldiers have been killed in an airstrike by NATO-led forces in Afghanistan's eastern province of Logar. Afghan officials say at least 8 others were seriously wounded. The strike on friendly targets was accidental, coalition forces said, adding that they were mistaken for insurgents during the operation meant to support Afghan security forces. The affected soldiers have been moved to Kabul. Meanwhile, the Afghan government is calling for an investigation. And some good news out of the U.S. The number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits for the first time hit a 3-month low last week. The U.S. Labor Department said the number of claims fell to their lowest level since November of last year to a seasonally adjusted 323,000. Analysts say the figures reflect a return to a more normal level, consistent with healthy labor market conditions. Meanwhile, a government report on employment will be released on Friday, which is expected to show the impact the severe cold weather has had on jobs growth. And staying with the U.S., 2 years and some billions of dollars. That's what Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Dempsey said it could cost to right the damage done by Edward Snowden's intelligence leaks. General Dempsey made the estimations at a meeting of the House Armed Services Committee. He also reported a mitigation task force had been established to probe the depth of the damage as well as to devise a solution to the theft. Former NSA contractor Edward Snowden faces espionage charges in the U.S. and is believed to be in Russia, where he has been given asylum. Over in Tunisia, the country's state of emergency, effective since 2011, has been lifted. The announcement was made Thursday on President Monsef Marzouki's official Facebook page. Tunisia has been taken by political turmoil and violence since then-leader Zain El Abidine Ben Ali was deposed at the start of 2011. The state of emergency was lifted early as it had been extended to June, though the government did add that law enforcement still had the option of seeking help from military forces where appropriate. And ahead of the International Women's Day on Saturday, the OECD has released a survey that examined how much, quote, unpaid work women and men in the 34 member nations pitched in around the house. Comparing statistics related to a number of minutes men and women contributed to doing chores, the report concluded working women were slowly closing the gap, though there is still a huge gender gap in unpaid work. It found that Norwegian men clocked in the most time contributing to household chores, while the men who contributed the least came from Japan.
Good afternoon. Well, it's another cold, windy day, and afternoon highs in the entire country should be similar to what we had yesterday. But as we can see, it's looking clear at the moment, but we could see some passing clouds later in the day. So overall, we will have cold but nice Friday afternoon. Though the most parts of the country is suffering from dry weather condition, a dry weather watch has been expanded about 2 hours ago, and health experts recommend drinking 7 to 8 glasses of water and avoid caffeinated drinks to stay hydrated. And as for the weather outlook, temperatures will finally get up to seasonal averages tomorrow afternoon, but we might get snow on Sunday morning in the upper parts of the peninsula, but I'll be sure to have an update on that in my next weather report. So please do keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will get up to 5, while Daegu, Gwangju, Busan should all get up to 8 under lots of sunshine. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju will climb up to 7, Daejeon will see a high of 8, while the top temperature on Mount Keungang will be freezing cold at -4. Well, that's all from me this week, and back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you very much, Jion. And those are the stories we're following on this Friday lunchtime.
Join us again for more updates on the day's headlines on our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time.
And Jinju and I will be back at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.